Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Buddha and welcome to the first episode of StartCraft, an introduction to StarCraft as a spectator sport. Now this is a show that will teach you to watch and enjoy professional StarCraft games, starting from the very basics of what StarCraft is. In this first episode, we are going to introduce the three races, then watch a game between two professional players while introducing basic concept and units as the game unfolds. Now the first thing to note about StarCraft is that it's a real-time strategy game. It is a strategy game much like chess, but everything happens in real time, meaning there are no turns and players are actually free to select, move, and do whatever they want in real time without having to wait for the other player to play for himself. Now there are three races in StarCraft: the Terran, the Zerg, and the Protoss. The Terran is a human race, much like ourselves, except a bit more futuristic. They like mechanical suits, mechanical units such as tanks and big mechanical units. As a race, they usually have a lot of inner conflicts, so this leads to civil wars and a lot of very interesting scenarios. But in the meantime, they also have to deal with the threat of the Zerg and the Protoss when it happens. The second race, the Zergs, are a biological race that rapidly evolve according to where they are. They are usually a very dominating race, so their main goal is to dominate the universe. They usually overpower their opponents with sheer numbers, so you will see a lot of units from the Zerg, and this is usually referred to as a Zerg swarm. Now the Protoss race is a futuristic alien race. They are very much more advanced than the other race technology-wise, and they prefer peace to war. They are some factions of the Protoss race are kind of religious, depending on how you want to see it, but that's not too important right now. And basically, they will only engage in a conflict if absolutely necessary. So these are the three races in StarCraft. Once again, the Terran, the Zerg, and the Protoss. And we are going to jump in a game right after I tell you about the esports. Esports stands for electronic sports. It is a lot like any other sporting event, except they are all video games. Esports has grown a lot in the last few years, especially with the coming of StarCraft 2, and a lot of organizations such as Major League Gaming host esports tournaments. And these are worldwide tournaments, and they often feature a very large prize pool. The largest can go up to $200,000. Now let's jump into a game right away. And here is our first game. It features the Terran race, so it is going to be a Terran versus Terran game. In StarCraft, you can play a Terran versus Zerg, Terran versus Protoss, Zerg versus Protoss, or what we call mirror matchups, where the same race plays each other. Right now, we have two very famous players, one called E.G. Puma, the red player up here, and we have Select, the purple Terran player down here. Notice how I can click on the mini-map at the bottom right corner of the screen to actually move my camera around. Now the first thing to do in a StarCraft game is start mining minerals. These are the blue crystals right here. This actually gives money to these players so they can actually build other stuff. If we start the game right now, you can see these SCVs. They are also called workers or miners. They go back and forth between the mineral patches, harvesting minerals, and you can see the money slowly goes up. Now, every race has a main building. For the Terran player, this is called the command center. The command center has a few abilities, one of which is to produce SCVs, or workers. So players will build more SCVs, that way they can mine more money, and the more money you have, the more stuff you can produce, and obviously the more stuff you have, the faster you can defeat your opponent. Now, in a game of StarCraft, there are two ways of winning the game. The first is to destroy every single enemy building, so command centers included. These do not include units, so SCVs can remain alive as long as there are no buildings left. You win the game. The other way of winning the game is forcing your opponent to quit the game. This is usually how a game is won. At one point in the game, one player will feel that he has no chance in winning. He will type out GG, and that means a good game. It means he resigns the game and concedes victory to his opponent. Now, there is a second resource in StarCraft. This is Vespene gas. You can see some Vespene geysers right here. This is a Vespene geyser. It is a green resource, and to harvest this, you require to build a structure over it. In this case, the refinery. In the same way as you harvest minerals, SCVs will go back and forth between the refinery to harvest gas. Gas is usually associated to higher tier units. The tier of units is how far up the technology tree a unit is. We will come back to that later. So you can see that one player, Select, right here, has decided to start mining gas right away. Meanwhile, his opponent, e.g. Puma, has opted not to mine gas right away. Now, both these players have started to build a barracks. The barracks is the basic structure that will allow you to make attacking units. We will soon see a Marine in production from this barracks. There it is. The Marine is the basic attacking unit for the Terran race. As his name suggests, he is a simple man with a gun that can shoot other things. The Marine is usually the backbone of a Terran army, although it does happen in a lot of cases where Terran players will actually opt to not get Marines. This often will depend on the strategy that a player decides to go for, and there are many different strategies that a player can actually opt to go for. Now we see another building right here. It is a factory. A factory will enable you to produce other attacking units, usually mechanical units. The barracks, as we said, was to produce Marines. This is what we call a biological unit. Obviously, it is a human. The factory, on the other hand, will allow to produce things like tanks, which are mechanical units. Now, every Terran building can actually have an add-on. In this case, you can see that Select is producing a reactor add-on. This will give the barracks the ability to actually produce 2 Marines at the same time. The red player, Puma, has decided to go for a second command center. This is very common in StarCraft. Players will not stay on one base. The reason being that the more you can produce, the faster or the easier it is for you to kill your opponent. With a second base, you can get twice as many SCVs. These are, remember, these little workers that go back and forth between these blue minerals. And with twice as many workers mining from twice as many mineral patches, you can actually have twice the production. Now, you might wonder why a player wouldn't simply go for a lot of SCVs on one base. The reason is because these SCVs can only mine one at a time from these mineral patches. If you see this patch here, it is being mined by several SCVs. And the optimal number to have is actually 2 SCVs per patch. While one is returning minerals to the command center, the second one is mining. So e.g. Puma will have an economical advantage in this game because he is going for a very fast second base. So he is producing a very fast command center. Meanwhile, the purple player, Select, is producing a lot of Marines, and he has produced some Hellions. Hellions are these little rovers that actually have a flamethrower on their back and can deal with light units very quickly. If you look right here, you can see that the damage done by a Hellion is 8, and versus light, it's 14. You can see that the Hellion is a light unit, so it will take 14 damage from another Hellion. Same thing for a Marine. It is a light unit, so it will take 14 damage from a Hellion. Now we see from the purple player select the third unit production structure for Terran. This is called a starport. It will produce flying units. The first flying unit we see is a medevac. It serves a double purpose. The first one is it is a transport, so you can load up units. You will see these Marines load up into this medevac soon. The second purpose of the medevac is that it can actually heal up units, biological units. So if a Marine gets injured, the medevac can actually restore its hit points. You can see the hit points are down here, 150 on 150, and the Marines will actually get healed by the medevac. You can see that Select decided to load up the Marines, put them on the higher ground that is right here, and then load up the Hellions and do the same thing. This is a strategy, and he will actually try to put pressure on his opponent. So here comes the first attack with the Hellions, and the Hellions are trying to kill this bunker. The bunker is a structure that you can put units inside to safeguard them. You can see that the bunker has a lot of hit points, 400 compared to only 45 of a Marine. So it is a lot more resilient than a Marine. And Select has now sent his units inside the second base of Puma and is now killing workers. The advantage of killing SCVs is obviously these SCVs are not going to be able to mine anymore. And now Select, despite having a second base a lot later than his opponent, has actually killed a lot of workers. There is a little tab right here that we can see. He killed 12 workers, and now the worker count is actually 28 to 25. So Puma went for a very fast second base, meaning that he can produce twice as many SCVs as his opponent because he has 2 command centers. His opponent instead decided to go for a lot of units and tried to kill more workers, and it is a great example in this game because Select actually did the damage that he did to actually to negate the economic advantage of his opponent and gain an advantage for himself. You can see he is now 2 harvesters ahead. Harvesters, remember, are these little SCVs. Now, the one thing to note about the command center is that once a barracks is built, you can actually transform it into an orbital command. You can see the orbital command has a little radar on its head. And this enables some abilities for the orbital command. Abilities are special things that a building or a unit can do, and it costs energy. Energy is displayed at the bottom of the unit here. You can see 45 on 200 and regenerates at the rate of 1 energy per second. Energy obviously can be used for these abilities. The orbital command has 3 abilities. Call down mule. A mule, if we can find a mule right here, this is a mule, and the mule will actually return 30 minerals per trip instead of 5 like every SCV does. And the real advantage of the mule is that it can mine over SCVs. As we mentioned before, SCVs can only mine 1 at a time per mineral patch. With a mule here, the mule can actually mine over the SCV, and this mineral patch can be harvested twice as fast. Now, the mules will time out after 50 seconds. This means that after 50 seconds of existence, they will die. This is showed by the little gray bar right here on top of the mule. Now, we see finally another unit by Select. This is called a siege tank. Now, the siege tank is a mechanical unit, and it has what we call siege mode. We will see siege mode a bit further down the game. Siege mode is something you have to research on the add-on of a building that is called a tech lab. If you remember, we actually saw this reactor add-on on the barracks from Select before. The reactor, as I mentioned, will enable the Terran player to produce 2 units at the same time from a building. Now, the second add-on that exists for a Terran player is the Tech Lab. The Tech Lab will enable a production structure to actually train higher higher tier units, so higher up in the technology tree. For example, these tanks are higher up the technology tree. This tech lab will also give the option of researching some upgrades for these units, such as siege mode. And we will come back to siege mode whenever it is researched. Meanwhile, there is a small drop by Puma, so a lot like Select did in Puma's base, Puma is now doing the same thing in Select's base. You can see this red medevac right here has loaded up 4 remaining Marines and is now safely hiding in the corner of the map. Now, we actually see another unit here by Select. This is called a Banshee. The Banshee is produced, as you may have guessed, from the starport. It does require a Tech Lab add-on. So at one point there was a Tech Lab on this starport. One thing to note about Terran buildings, or most Terran buildings, is that you can actually float them up and land them back again. So the starport was probably here. It lifted up, drifted here, and landed back here. It did produce a Banshee, and a Banshee is a flying unit. It looks like a helicopter, and it only shoots ground though, so you cannot shoot air with the Banshee. And it does a lot of damage to ground units. You can see the Banshee killed a couple of workers. The Banshee is usually used to harass the mineral line. The mineral line being the line of workers going back and forth between the minerals and the command center. A new unit has popped out. This is called a Viking. The Viking is an air fighter that can only shoot air, but it also has this assault mode, which means the Viking can land on the ground and shoot land targets only. Now, one thing to note about StarCraft is that each player does not have the entire vision of the map. You can see this is E.G. Puma's vision right now. He can see only where his units are. In addition, he can see whatever he saw when he was in Select's base. So at one point in the game, Puma sent a unit here, saw that there was a bunker and a command center, and now it is displayed on his own minimap. But this might not be the case. For all Puma knows, there might be a barracks here. Note that you can also not see the units being on the map when you don't have vision. Same thing, here is Select's vision. Now Select has a bit of a wider vision. This is due to these Xel'Naga watchtowers. Once controlled by a unit, these towers will actually give vision to a player, and you can see he has vision of these 2 Hellions from his opponent. Now vision is a huge factor in every StarCraft game because StarCraft is a game of incomplete information. The more information you have, the better decisions you can make, and the better you can outplay your opponent. Now we actually see a small drop from Puma. Remember, this was the medevac that was actually in the corner here. It has come back trying to do some kind of damage, but it did not succeed and was killed off. Now, siege mode is still not researched for Select. Eventually we will see siege mode, but you can see that Puma has decided to go for tanks of his own. He does not have siege mode research as well, so we will just have to wait for siege mode. Now, one thing that is very important in the game of StarCraft is the concept of supply. Supply is indicated by this little number in the top left corner of the screen, or right here in the center of the screen if you are watching a replay. So notice how E.G. Puma has 87 over 102 supply, meanwhile Select has 91 over 94 supply. This means that Select actually has more stuff on the map than Puma, or at least more units. Every unit will use up supply. For example, these Marines will use up 1 supply. Medevacs will use up 2 supply, and tanks will actually use up 3 supply. Now you have a limit of supply. If you remember at the start of the game, this number was actually 6 on 11. The command center provides you with 11 supply. But to get that number up, you actually have to build supply depots. This is like feeding your army. If you don't have enough supply, you cannot maintain an army. This means that if, for example, Select is on 91 on 94 supply, this means he can only produce 3 more Marines before he reaches his maximum supply. He can increase that maximum supply by building more supply depots. Supply depots have the ability to actually be they are built on top of the ground, but have the ability to burrow underground like these supply depots right here. What players will usually do with supply depots is form a wall like Select did right here, and once he wants to get his second base, he can just lower the supply depots, acting like a door to his second base. This means that if his opponent decides to attack right here, he can unlower or raise the supply depots and block off his main base. This forces his opponent to actually kill off these supply depots while his own units kill off the opponent units. That is not too important, at least in this game. Note, though, that there is a maximum supply of 200. So once you reach the maximum supply of 200, no matter how many more supply depots you make, you cannot go over that supply, or that amount of supply. Now these Hellions are walking across the map. They have an upgrade called Blue Flame, or Infernal Pre-Igniter is the correct name, but it is usually referred to as Blue Flame. Blue Flame is an upgrade that will deal additional damage versus light units, rendering these Hellions very, very good against other Hellions and Marines. Like we said, if you remember these tanks, they are actually armored units. You can see right here it says armored. This means that the Hellions will not deal that extra damage to tanks. Tanks, if you are curious, will actually deal 15 damage and 25 damage versus armored. So tanks are good versus other tanks, as well as these Marauders right here. Marauders are kind of a heavy version of the Marines, but they cannot shoot air. But in exchange, they deal extra damage and fire some big rockets. You will see them fire later on in the game. Now finally, Siege mode has been researched by Select, so we will see the Siege tanks siege up momentarily. And in Siege mode, the Siege tanks cannot move anymore, so it prevents them from moving, but it does give them extra range and extra damage, as well as what we call area of effect damage or splash damage. As soon as these tanks siege up, we will have a demo of this area of effect damage later on in the game. Essentially, this means that if a tank targets, for example, this Marine right here, the area of effect damage will actually hit all units surrounding that unit in a small range. So if a tank targets this Marine, it will hit all these other Marines. Now Select is moving across the map, taking control of the watchtower so that his opponent cannot see his movements, and it looks like he is deciding to actually try attack soon his opponent Puma, but Puma is well guarded, safe inside his base. And if you look at the harvester count, Puma has actually decided to build more harvesters than his opponent. He is at 58 harvesters, or over 41, and this gives him a slight economical advantage. And there you go, the siege tanks have finally sieged up, and you will see that their first volley of shots will actually hit these units and do huge damage to them. You can see the range of the siege tank is delimited by these little white dots. Only when you select them can you see this. So I will unpause and you will see the area of effect damage of a siege tank. There it is. That here, right here, was a siege tank shot, and you can see that a few Marines died from it. Now, this is an ability from the orbital command. Remember I told you the orbital command had the ability to drop down mules? Well, another ability is actually the scan sweep. This reveals any area of the map. So right now, Puma is actually scanning Select's army to see what is there. Meanwhile, Select is scanning E.G. Puma's army, so they are essentially doing the same thing. One fun thing to note about tanks is that they can actually shoot further than they can see. This means that this tank, when it is sieged up, can actually shoot about to here, but can only see about here. This means if you have a flying unit to see here, the tank will be able to shoot further than they can see. Same thing if you scan here, the tanks can actually shoot further because they can see further. Now one more unit has popped out on the field. This is called a Raven. The Raven is a spellcaster unit. This means it cannot attack, but it has some spells that it can use with its energy that is slowly gathering up. Now we have a big engagement. You will see how effective these Hellions are against the Marines. And Hellions actually have area of effect damage as well. This means that the flame that you see from the Hellions right here, every unit that is in the way of this flame will take damage from the Hellion. This makes it very effective against large clumps of units like this one. Now Puma looks like he has a lot more stuff than Select, so now he is actually going to be the one attacking, and with all these siege tanks up and sieged, it will be very, very hard for Select to actually leave his base. And this is one thing that siege tanks are very good at, because they do such big damage. If you siege them up right next to your opponent base, this forces your opponent into staying into his own base. And this is what we call a contain. It means you contain your opponent to a base, and there you go. You might wonder why Select actually did that. We will come back in the game just a bit further back. Okay, so as you remember, these medevacs can actually load up units. We have seen a new unit on the map. These are called Thors. Select has decided to make Thors. They are these very large mechanical units, basically bipeds, but very, very large and purely mechanical. There is no human in there, maybe a driver, we don't really know. But a medevac can actually hold on to a Thor. You can see the Thor is under the medevac. And one strategy that Select is using right here is he will deposit the Thor right on top of these tanks. And if you remember what we talked about this before, tanks actually have area of effect damage. This means that if you shoot this unit, for example, all units surrounding it will take damage. Well, the thing is with tanks is that your own units will actually take damage from your own tanks. So this tank was shooting this Thor, but since his own tanks were so close to the Thors, the tanks actually took damage from it. Now I am only mentioning this because it happened, but this is usually a very advanced technique that players will use. You can see that Select gave out the GG. Obviously Puma did not kill every single building, but Select felt that his opponent had a lot more stuff and there was no way he could win this game, and rightly so, because his opponent has 136 supply to only 55. Now this concludes the first episode of StartCraft. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you understood what happened here. If you enjoyed this cast, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, like the video, and I will be posting more of these episodes every week, or as much as I can. And thanks for watching, guys. And actually, before I leave, we will just recap briefly what we saw today. So StarCraft, a real-time strategy game, as you saw in the game, is a game of strategy much like chess, but without turns. So both the players can do whatever they want at all times. There are three races: the Terran, the Zerg, and the Protoss. Today we saw a game involving two Terran players, and one of them just overwhelmed his opponent by producing more stuff, by mining minerals, those blue things, mining gas, the green resource, by producing units out of his production structures, and eventually just gathering a bigger army than his opponent. And with his movements, with all his tiny little subtle techniques that we did not go over today, he managed to force his opponent to leave the game. So thanks for watching, guys, and until next time, this was StartCraft, and thanks for watching.